I've been censored for quoting, but now it's the basis for a Supreme Court decision. The Carter-Baker Commission noted that, quote, absentee balloting is vulnerable to abuse in several ways. Citizens who vote at home, at nursing homes, at the workplace, or in church are more susceptible to pressure, overt and subtle, or to intimidation. Next up, we have some good news for a change to talk about, which were two great Supreme Court decisions, and they are about elections and your First Amendment core rights. Two great decisions. Judicial Watch participated in both of the cases through friend of court briefs, and we've been, in some cases, pursuing these issues for years. And obviously, the first case is something that we're very much interested in because we've been the private sector leader in trying to ensure our elections are clean. I want to say that again. Judicial Watch has been the private sector leader in trying to ensure our elections are clean. No one else has filed as many lawsuits, A, to uncover the truth about what government officials are doing with respect to dirty elections, and B, trying to protect clean elections. The Supreme Court upheld clean election law efforts in Arizona that really just blow up the leftist canard and racist dishonesty that has been levied at those trying to ensure that elections are fair and honest. And specifically in Arizona, there were two laws, basic laws, that one banned ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting is mostly banned throughout the country for obvious reasons. It allows third parties in an unchecked way, practically speaking, at least in California's version of it, to collect ballots and turn them in. I mean, talk about an opportunity for fraud. And then secondly, they upheld prohibitions related to out-of-precinct voting. What is out-of-precinct voting? It means when you go to vote, you're supposed to go and vote in your precinct. If you voted, you know what to do, right? You say, hey, this is my neighborhood polling place, and this is where I go to vote. And it helps ensure that your identity is assured. It helps ensure your actual identity and that you are the actual voter. Because if you can vote, if in theory you can vote anywhere in a jurisdiction, obviously it increases the opportunity for fraud. I mean, you vote, let's say you vote regularly in one place, your precinct, and someone decides to vote your name somewhere else. They're able to vote in theory because they sometimes get ballots. Under the left's view, they should be able to get ballots if they show up in the wrong place to vote. And so the restrictions on that, they said, were racist. And the court said, no way are these prohibitions and these restrictions inappropriate. They are frankly standard in many places across the country and have been for dozens of years. And just saying they're racist doesn't make it so. And in the case of Arizona, the leftists challenging the law, they said, well, these rules impact minorities more than non-minorities. And I think the difference was something like 99.3% versus 99.1%, at which Justice Alito noted is obviously an immaterial difference. And who are they fooling here? And of course, the rules themselves are neutral and aren't targeted at minorities. So that whole canard has been destroyed by this 6-3 decision. As I said, the decision is a home run for cleaner elections. It reaffirms that states, and this is important, may take action to prevent election fraud without waiting for it to occur within their own borders. And that's the other left's big lie. Oh, well, there's no evidence of election fraud, so you don't need any rules against election fraud. As if that's the purpose only of legislation, to protect and preserve clean elections and to reassure Americans and voters that the elections are being conducted in a regular and fair and honest way. The new decision rightly rejects the race baiting, as I said, of the leftist partisans who pretend that neutral provisions to combat voter fraud, such as voter ID and bans on ballot harvesting, are presumptively racist. And the decision also destroys the foundation for the Biden administration's recent attack. You know, they filed a lawsuit last week against the Georgia rules. They were modest election reform laws that, frankly, I think were too modest. States can be confident now that they can go full speed ahead. And this is what's driving the left crazy to strengthen elections and protect voting rights with security measures such as voter ID and other sensible, common sense ideas to make it harder to steal elections. And I think you always have to go back. Why does the left oppose? I mean, I think the question answers itself. Why do you think the left opposes voter ID, cleaning up election rolls? We have 3 lawsuits in federal court right now to clean up election rolls in Pennsylvania, Colorado, North Carolina, and we're opposed by leftist interest groups. In addition to fighting the government, we have to fight the institutional left in court, little old Judicial Watch. Why do you think they oppose all of that? They oppose cleaning up election rolls, voter ID, the very idea of decision verification, any basic election integrity measures. Why do you think they oppose it? You know why I think? Because I think they want to be able to engage in fraud when necessary. And I encourage you, by the way, to read these decisions. They're usually written in a way that a layman can understand, and you'll see what I mean. Go ahead and read the decisions. And some of it may fly over your head. I'm a layman. Some of it, I'm not terribly interested in because I don't think it's important to the decision. And so you don't have to worry about whether you understand everything, but there's enough there that you'll be very interested in it, especially on this election issue. Because it's important. Let me just say this. It's important you read this decision because it provides ammunition for you in your activist life as a citizen and a voter in terms of advocating for stronger and cleaner elections. A state indisputably, this is Justice Alito writing for the majority, has a compelling interest in preserving the integrity of its election process. So this ain't no joke. Limiting the classes of persons who may handle early ballots to those less likely to have ulterior motives deters potential fraud and improves voter confidence. That was the view of the Bipartisan Commission on Federal Election Reform, chaired by former President Jimmy Carter and former Secretary of State James Baker. The Carter-Baker Commission, and this is a commission report that I've quoted, and I've been censored for quoting, but now it's the basis for a Supreme Court decision. The Carter-Baker Commission noted that, quote, absentee balloting is vulnerable to abuse in several ways. Citizens who vote at home, at nursing homes, at the workplace, or in church are more susceptible to pressure, overt and subtle, or to intimidation. The commission warned that, quote, vote buying schemes are far more difficult to detect when citizens vote by mail. States therefore should reduce the risks of fraud and abuse in absentee balloting by prohibiting third-party organizations, candidates, and political party activists from handling absentee ballots. And Alito says the commission ultimately recommended that states limit the classes of persons who may handle absentee vote ballots to the voter, of course, an acknowledged family member, the U.S. Postal Service, how are you going to get it if you don't mail it, or other legitimate shipper or election officials. So meaning no third parties. And the underlying law is even more permissive in that it also authorizes ballot handling by a voter's household member and caregiver, meaning, I don't know, if someone's helping your mom or dad and they're elderly, and the helper or the home health care provider can drop it at the box for her. And Alito notes that restrictions on ballot collection are also common in other states. So we have the Supreme Court acknowledging and affirming that there are legitimate concerns about fraud with respect to mail-in voting. Ballot harvesting only being one aspect of it. And the Alito goes on to say it should go without saying that a state may take action to prevent election fraud without waiting for it to occur and be detected within its own borders. The Voting Rights Act was at issue in this case, Section 2, which prohibits basically targeting, restricting people's votes based on their race. Section 2's command that the political process remain equally open surely does not demand that, quote, a state's political system sustain some level of damage before the legislature can take corrective action. Fraud is a real risk that accompanies mail-in voting, even if Arizona had the good fortune to avoid it. Election fraud has had serious consequences in other states. For example, the North Carolina Board of Elections, it was a Republican election, by the way, that was invalidated the results of a 2018 race for a seat in the House of Representatives for evidence of fraudulent mail-in ballots. The Arizona legislature was not obligated to wait for something similar to happen closer to home. So this kind of blows out of the water the left's concerns, and which really are not in good faith in most cases, about election security measures. The fact that this had to go all the way to the Supreme Court is troublesome, but it was a common sense decision. And the fact that 3 liberal justices, I guess Kagan played the race card in objecting, shows you that our elections are always going to be a close run thing. I mean, if you get the courts going the wrong way, if you get elected officials going the wrong way, we can have elections that are ruined. I mean, look at what's happening in New York. They had a Democratic primary that was terribly compromised by incompetence or who knows what else. It needs to be investigated because they've got this ranked choice voting scheme, which is something the left has been pushing, and I could go on and on about why that's a problem. But anyway, it's a confusing way to vote too often for many voters. So you had the Democratic mayoral primary up there, and it turns out they left at least 135,000 test ballots in the count that they then had to take out. And the leading candidate is sued in court. So here we've got Democrats screwing up an election and a Democratic candidate suing in court to protect election integrity. I guess that's okay. It's only okay when one side does it. Isn't that true? So this is great. So as I said, the race card was rejected. They affirmed the state interest in making sure that elections are fair and honest. And the Georgia case, as far as I'm concerned, I think it was ridiculous to begin with that Garland is pursuing. It's an embarrassment. If he doesn't pull it back, it shows you how partisan Garland is and how abusive of his power Garland is on the Biden administration generally, because they're doing this at the behest of the White House and Democrats in Congress. But the challenges to state election reforms that many state legislatures are doing in response to the 2020 election controversies are really going to be significantly harder to pursue by left-wing partisans because they can't play the race card anymore with fraudulent racial statistics. The Supreme Court saw through that, and the court recognized the legitimacy and the legitimacy of the concerns that Judicial Watch has had, President Trump has had, and tens of millions of Americans have had of both political parties, that elections be free and fair, and that state legislatures take steps to ensure that they are free and fair by making sure only eligible voters vote, and that the process is set up in a way that people don't think it's all being gamed. So a great decision. I encourage you to read it. And Judicial Watch will continue, as I said, in its litigation to clean up the election rolls. We had success in Illinois gaining access to information, success in Maryland gaining access to information. We have a lawsuit in Georgia to figure out what went on in that election down there, and more is coming. And I encourage you to get your state legislative officials to look at this decision, and you should ask them what else are they going to do to make sure. Not every state has voter ID. 15 states don't have voter ID that cover major states like New York and California, Illinois. I don't think Pennsylvania has voter ID. I think the governor just vetoed a voter ID law there. And frankly, a lot of the states that have voter ID, the voter ID isn't terribly strong. So look it up, get active, and support Judicial Watch's efforts as well.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.